About 2 nights ago, I woke up to the alarm sound of my inverter, which was indicating that the battery was dangerously low. So I got up from the bed and I went to put off the inverter because there'd been terrible power supply for a number of days. And so the inverter battery had gone terribly low. And I looked at the time, it was about 2:30 a.m. And I went back to bed and tried to sleep, to go back to sleep. But I couldn't sleep. I found myself very restless, tossing and turning, and I couldn't sleep. And it seemed like an hour had gone by. And here I was, still of the night, quiet, but I couldn't sleep. And at that moment, lying on that bed, in darkness, a thought came to my mind. And the thought was, Tola, both your parents are still alive. Both your parents are still alive. Now, that was something I already knew. It wasn't like a revelation. But at that time, lying on that bed, in that dark environment with no electricity, it was an epiphany for me. And at that moment, I felt a huge sense of gratitude and joy. And I found myself speaking out to God and saying, God, I am so grateful for the gift of my parents, that I have both parents still alive. And I am in my 40s, 44-year-old, both parents still alive. My parents are in their late 70s. What a gift this is. And I found myself filled with so much joy. I cannot even explain it. I was filled with so much joy, and the whole room that was so dark seemed like it was lit up. I was lit up from the inside, and I just kept on thanking God. I was like, thank you, God. Thank you, God. Thank you for this great gift of my parents. I don't know where this thought came from, but the feeling of gratitude was so incredible. And then I spent some more time awake, and the Spirit of God revealed something to me that I want to share with you on the podcast today. He shared with me 3 states of consciousness. 3 states of consciousness. And that's what I feel led to talk to you about today on the podcast. The 3 states of human consciousness. And this revealed to me why I had information that I already knew. I knew my parents were alive. I knew it before going to bed. It's something I've always known. But why did it ring differently for me on that night? Why I laid on the bed? Because of my state of consciousness. So I'm going to talk about 3 states of consciousness today. And I need us to pay close attention because it's very important. There are 3 states of human consciousness. And the first state of human consciousness is the blind state. Blind consciousness. The first state of human consciousness is like a pyramid. At the very bottom of the pyramid is blindness. is the blind state. And unfortunately, majority of the world live or exist in this blind state of human consciousness. And what's the blind state of human consciousness? You see, blindness, when we look at it as a disability, is the inability to see light, the inability to perceive what's around you visually. A blind person, someone that is born blind, needs to be taught what different things are. And a blind person lives mainly by trust on others. So when somebody is blind, you have to lead them and tell them what is actually going on. So when someone is born blind or someone becomes blind, when they want to cross the road, they need somebody who has their full vision to tell them the road is clear for them to cross. They are victims of that person's integrity and honesty, and sometimes the person's intelligence. So when somebody is leading a blind person and say, you can cross the road now, the car is pretty far. The car that is approaching is pretty far. The blind person must trust the person telling them that the car is pretty far, that they have a good approximation of distance, and when it is safe to cross the road with a car that they perceive as pretty far. That's what it means to be blind physically. But what does it mean to be blind in your consciousness? This is a state that a lot of people are born into. A lot of us, we are born into blindness. And that means that everything that we take in as information is given to us. We are led into it. We were not curious about it. We were just thrown into it. So we are born, we are thrown into school, and they tell us 1 + 1 is 2. They teach us the English language. They teach us morals. They teach us what society requires of us. A lot of times we are told how to live. We are told. We are told how to live, what to value, what not to value. We are led like blind people. Like the blind person about to cross the road. You have somebody else telling you when to cross and when a car is far enough. You do not actually judge for yourself. So a lot of times when we are born into the world, we are given values and assumptions and perspectives that we are not allowed to judge by ourselves. They are just given to us to take. They come in form of tradition. They come in form of religion. They come in form of education. These things are most likely forced on you. For most people, you didn't choose your religion when you were born. It was forced on you. You were given your religion. You were born into it. When you were born, you were taken to a church, taken to a mosque, taken to a place of traditional worship. Like a blind person, you were led. Your early schooling wasn't chosen by you. Somebody chose the primary school, the crèche, the nursery school, the secondary school you went to. A lot of people, even up to university, was chosen for you. Like a blind person, someone led you. A lot of things were chosen for you. So your belief system, a lot of times, is not something that comes from curiosity. A lot of times, it's something that is cast upon you. So you have to trust the people that are leading you to have your best intention at heart. Just like a blind person has to trust the people leading him or her to give him or her the right information. So when a blind person is sitting in a house and somebody comes in and says, "Oh, it's the man that just came inside," you have to trust the person telling you to give you the right information that it's actually a man and not a woman. Because you don't know. You cannot see. If that person doesn't speak, you cannot know. But you know somebody came in. And then the person around you tells you, "Oh, it's just a young man that came inside." But it's actually a woman. Or tells you, "Oh, just my friend, a woman that came inside," but it's actually a man. The blind state of consciousness. A huge percentage of the world lives in this blind state of consciousness. They think they know, but what they know is actually what has been told them. You know, I started watching this series. It's a cartoon series. It's for kids, but then it is much deeper than face value because it's in form of a cartoon. But it's very deep. It's called Avatar, The Last Airbender. It's a very interesting story. And it talks about 4 different communities. I think that I'll just call them communities. The fire people, the earth people, the water people, the wind people. And all these people were living together in harmony at a particular time up until the fire people decided to rebel and take over everyone and be the only existing community or tribe. Now, the interesting thing about watching this thing is about how everyone lives in their own little community, thinking they are the best and thinking that their values and their perspective is the right way to go. That is exactly how a lot of us are. We have belief systems that have never truly been questioned. We were never conscious of choosing them. So we go into them and we hold on to them blindly. A lot of people fight for their belief systems that they do not truly understand. It's just like a blind person that is told to cross the road and telling them that, "Oh, there's no car coming." But really, someone else is coming and saying, "There's actually a car coming," and you're arguing with them and saying, "The person that is with me told me there's no car coming. There's no car coming. I believe there's no car coming." And people are saying there's a car coming. But you've trusted too blindly what has been cast upon you. Blind consciousness. There's so many people living in blind consciousness. They think they know, but they really have no idea. Now, the second level of consciousness is what I want to call the awakened consciousness. The awakened consciousness. Now, this is the consciousness when you realize and begin to question what you've been taught. You realize that a lot of things you've been taught were not chosen by you. You were not curious about them. The awakened consciousness is when you begin to embrace curiosity and begin to ask questions And then for the first time, you begin to see light. You begin to see light. And the first thing the light reveals are distortions. Distortions. Irregularities with what you actually believed over a long period of time. This is a state of being awake. Awake. It's a state of consciousness of questioning things. And for the first time, seeing that some things are not the way they ought to be. Seeing that what was told to you was a car was actually a bicycle. What was told to you was a pencil was actually a knife. When you begin to see distortions, it's a state of consciousness when you see the way things are not. Very important. You see things, but then you begin to see distortions. You see abnormalities. You begin to see abnormalities. It is not a very common state of mind. There are fewer people that are awake in this world than people that are blind. But there are people that are awake. A lot of times, it's called the knowledge stage, where they begin to know that their frailties and their errors and distortions in their past perception of things. A lot of times, that's what philosophy, the subject matter of philosophy, entails. When people begin to question things, a lot of times, a lot of ugly things are revealed. A lot of times, when people go from blindness to being awakened, what happens is that they realized that all or most of what they have learned are lies. They realize that their belief system and all those things they've held on to ruggedly, whether through religion, whether through education, whether through tradition, are founded on things that don't really hold. It can be a very uncomfortable stage. A state of being awakened. Very uncomfortable. It can be very tormenting. That's why you realize that a lot of philosophers ended up with depression. A lot of them. Friedrich Nietzsche, Schopenhauer, Socrates, a lot of them ended up depressed. A lot of them are depressed. Because it's a stage that can turn your world upside down. It's a stage when you begin to see darkness. You open your eyes and you begin to see darkness. You are no longer blind, but then you are introduced to the concept of darkness. And you see how much darkness is around you. I meet a lot of people that are in this stage of life. A lot of them are very angry. A lot of them are very rebellious. A lot of them have become very antisocial. I know a lot of people that way. They've been awakened. and they can't close their eyes anymore. Once you are awake to something, you cannot go to sleep on it again. Your eyes have been opened to it, to that distortion. You cannot unsee it anymore. And this happened in the Avatar, The Last Airbender. There was this guy from the fire people who always thought that the fire people were meant to take over the whole world. And then he went out destroying other tribes. And at a point, he came to a place of awakening and realized that the fire people were actually the villains. The people and the tradition that he has defended all his life were actually the people that were the antagonists. And it shook his world. It shook his world. Becoming awake shakes your world. When you watch a movie like The Matrix, that's what it's all about. It's about awakening. There's a guy called Neo, totally blind, living in a world, a simulation where he was being controlled, but he thought he was in control of things. Till he met Morpheus, and Morpheus offered him the blue-red pill, and we all know what happened. From there, he chose to be awake, and then he couldn't close his eyes anymore. He saw that everything he was living in the world was a lie. It can be a very depressive state. But a lot of people stop here. And this is what I'm actually talking about. This is what I really want to talk about in this podcast. It is not enough to be awake. I've met so many people that have opened their eyes. But when you open your eyes on your own, without God, the first thing you will see is darkness. The first thing you would see is darkness. The first thing the light would reveal to you is darkness. The first thing you become conscious of is the absence of light. You would see a distorted world. And that's the problem with being awakened. That's the problem with philosophy that is not based on spirituality. I see a lot of people seeking knowledge, but they do not seek it from spirituality. So at best, what comes is awakening. And awakening opens your eyes up to the concept of distortion and shame. This is what happened with Adam and Eve. Adam and Eve chose information outside of God. And the first thing when their eyes was open was to the distortion of their nakedness. The first thing they saw was a distorted reality. They saw nakedness and they felt shame because they sought information outside of spirituality. That is the danger of knowledge outside of God. A lot of people seek knowledge through books, through courses, through trainings, through interaction with men, and try to exclude God. The best man can offer you through his intellectualism is awakening. And awakening only brings the burden of knowledge. And what is the burden of knowledge? Is to see distortion. Knowledge allows you to see distortion. There is something higher than knowledge. A lot of people think the world is about blind or awake, but there is a higher level of consciousness. It is not a 2-step pyramid, it's a 3-step pyramid. And that's what I want to introduce to you today. is the consciousness called awareness. Awareness. This is when your eyes are open and then light rushes into your eyes, but not a light that reveals darkness, but a light that gives understanding. There is a difference between knowledge and understanding. Knowledge is a revelation of darkness. Understanding is a revelation of light. And that is what only God can give you. When God opens your eyes, you would have understanding. This is something that Adam and Eve missed out on. When you read the story of Adam and Eve, they chose to go to the tree of knowledge and good, of good and evil. And the tree of knowledge and evil only reveals the fruit of a distortion of good, but it doesn't tell you what is good. You see, Adam and Eve had two choices. They could have eaten the fruit, which they decided to go with, or they could have waited for God that evening. That shows up to them. The Bible tells us that God used to show up to them every evening to interact with them. They could have chosen to ask God the question. The serpent came today and told us this. God, give us understanding of why you truly told us not to eat of this. But they decided to choose it themselves and leave God out of it. Which is what a lot of you do. Some of you are in deep blindness. You have never questioned anything that has been given to you. A lot of things that you fight for, broken relationships for, argued for, you don't even know why you believe in it. Religion, tradition, education. It does nothing but separate us. But then the people that have tried to go a step further have found themselves in a place of seeking awakening. But because of their pride and their decision and their resolve to never trust God, this concept of God is mind control. I will seek out my own information myself and take my destiny in my hand and go and learn about these things. They get knowledge. But what does it do? It brings shame. It makes them ashamed of themselves, ashamed of the world, makes them angry, makes them opposed to human beings. It doesn't give them any sense of direction. All it does is reveal corruption around them, and they're always very angry. I see them, they're all over. They're all over. Go on social media. On Instagram, Twitter, they say very deep things about distortions in the world and how everything is a lie. But do they ever tell you the direction to go? No, because they have no solution. They have no light. All they have is a revelation of darkness. That's why a lot of them end up depressed. A lot of them end up depressed. They are so sad because they want to live life without God, get the answer outside of God. But that awakening only comes from God. Awareness only comes from God. Awareness is the consciousness of light and direction of what to do and where to go, how to navigate the world. There's a story in the Bible where Jesus heals a blind man. It's a very interesting story. There was this blind man, Jesus healed him. He was blind, went through the 3 stages. And then Jesus put some mud on his eyes, told him, open up his eyes. And he opened his eyes. And the first thing he saw, distortions. God said, what did you see? What do you see? He said he saw men walking as trees. So he saw people walking, but they weren't walking normally. It was a very distorted, abnormal world. That's all he could see, men walking as trees. It was the first time he was seeing. But then what he was seeing was distortions. And then Jesus touched his eyes again and told him to open his eyes the second time. And then he could see normally. And then God told him, don't go back to that place, that town you used to live. Don't go back there again. Go somewhere else. God gave him an understanding of what to do. God made him know that the town was his biggest problem, not his blindness. The town was probably the cause of his blindness. And said, don't go back to it again if you want to continue to see. You see, this story in the Bible about Jesus and the blind man tells us everything about blindness, awakening, and awareness. When he became aware, he knew what to do with his vision. He knew where to go and where not to go. He knew where his life will prosper and where his life will be destroyed. He had understanding. Not just a knowledge of what light looked like or how people were moving. Because what he saw was distortion, stuff he couldn't really understand, but he knew that it was abnormal. Imagine if Jesus had left him looking at people like trees with legs. He would have been a demented person. He would have gone from blind to demented, and very soon he would request to be blind again. That's what I've seen with a lot of people that have chosen to be awake by intellectualism. A lot of them wish they never found out what they knew because they have no understanding. They have no light. Awareness is light. There's a part of the Bible I want to read to you. It's a scripture my wife reminded me of, and she was reading it some years ago, I think maybe last year or so, but I didn't get it, but now I get it. It's Ephesians 1:18. Ephesians chapter 1 verse 18. I'll read it out for those of you that don't have Bibles. It says, I pray that your heart will be flooded with light so that you can understand the confident hope he has given to those he called. This verse is packed. It says, I pray that your heart be flooded with light so that you can understand. This was Paul talking to the Ephesians. He knew that the true way of seeing is when light floods your mind and your heart. When the Bible says heart, it means your mind. You understand? Your mind. Sometimes some version says the eyes of your understanding, the eyes of your mind be flooded with light. A lot of us, our minds are not flooded with light. So we are either blind or just awake to disruptions. And that's why we are sad and we are not grateful. You see, that's what happened to me 2 days ago when I lay down on that bed. And the Spirit revealed to me, Tola, both your parents are alive. At first, I was blind to that information. Made no sense to me. Alive, not alive, doesn't make sense. But when the Spirit revealed it to me, light came flooding to my mind of how undeserving I was of that gift. How much of a gift it was to still have my parents with me, alive. You see, some people are awakened. They have their parents with them. But when they are awakened, all they see is their parents' flaws, their parents' shortcoming, the trauma their parents caused them. That's all they see. So when they remember their parents, they see them in a distorted light. But you see what? When light floods your mind through God, God would even make you see that your parent, that you see, that you always seen with shortcomings, you begin to be grateful for even having them in the first place. Because you now begin to realize, if they didn't come, I wouldn't be brought into this world. You will be overwhelmed with a sense of gratitude rather than a sense of regret. When that concept hit my mind that day, I didn't think of my parents' flaws. I didn't think of whether they were the richest parents in the world or the most understanding. All I thought of was how much of a privilege it was to still have them. That I can still go and seek their advice. That I can still celebrate Father's Day and Mother's Day. Light. There was an awareness. And that awareness brought joy. I became so grateful. A lot of you are not aware because you have excluded God. And so you feel unblessed. So when you look at things, you don't look at them with the eyes of light. You look at them with the eyes of knowledge, with the eyes of darkness. You are knowledgeable about how much you have in your bank account. You are knowledgeable, but you don't understand that what you have in your bank account, no matter how small, is a gift. That you have it is a gift. That some people out there do not have it, but you have it. And that it could be taken from you anytime, but you still have it. Awareness can turn what seems like grief into a moment of gratitude. I remember someone sent me a video about this lady who, her husband was sick. She was a young lady, young couple, beautiful lady. And she talked about how her husband died of a particular sickness. I can't remember what it was. I think it was a cancer. I cannot remember. But then he died. And then she was so sad. A Muslim lady. And she said a lot of friends came to comfort her. And she said she couldn't find comfort in any of the things they were saying. And then all of a sudden, a particular day, light came to her mind. And then she realized it was a privilege to have this husband for that many years. She thought of all the experiences they had together. And she realized, why was I so lucky to have this person? I don't know how many years they were lucky for, maybe 4 years, 10 years, I don't know. But she saw those years as a gift. And she began to be grateful for the life that she was able to share with this amazing person, rather than the knowledge that he was gone. And she said she was filled with so much gratitude. And she went from grief to gratitude because her mind was flooded with light. And finally, she had understanding that she was not deprived, but she was privileged. I pray that somebody listening to this podcast today will begin to live a life of awareness. Because when you become truly aware, light would enter your mind. And when light enters your mind, it will pervade your entire being. Jesus said this in the Bible. He says, if a man's eyes are full of darkness, that means all he sees is darkness. Before you know it, his entire being would be full of darkness. That's why when people get knowledge and begin to see distortions, they begin to see distortion in religion. Then before you know it, they begin to see distortion in tradition. Then they begin to see distortion in education. And before you know it, they live a distorted life. All they see is distortion. No matter who you are to them, all they will see is the distorted part of you. And someone that only sees this distortion would always be depressed. But the Bible tells us, Jesus said, if your eyes are full of light, before you know it, your entire being will be full of light. You see, We don't meditate enough because we've leaned too much to Western tradition, which is a lot about doing, achieving, getting. But when we lean towards Eastern tradition, it's very meditative. And that's why they achieve a lot, especially even in work and production. That's why they live longer. Have you ever asked yourself why the Chinese live longer than the Americans? Meditation is very important, and I'll tell you how. Now, there's a part of meditation where I told you I was reading this book, Osho. Meditation by Osho, The First and Last Freedom. That's what it's called. Someone told me to recommend the book. So I realized that Osho, there's a man called Osho. He was an Indian teacher. But I realized he had written a lot of books on meditation. So if you just look for Osho meditation, you'll get a lot of them. But there's one called Meditation, The First and Last Freedom by Osho. I told you one of the best meditation books I've read. But one thing I realized when it talks about meditation, you see, meditation is an awareness. It's an awareness, a sense of awareness. That's why a lot of time when I tell people to meditate, they tell them to breathe and to be aware of the oxygen, the air going into their nose. A lot of us were not aware of that thing. We just go around every day seeking money, seeking this, seeking prestige, but we are unaware of the gift of oxygen that we have. So when I tell people to meditate, tell them to breathe. And when you breathe, you are aware that life is entering your body. It's the smallest thing. You can't see oxygen. It's so small, so minute. But by being aware of it, you realize that this thing helps sustain your life. When you're aware that you're taking this thing in naturally, you begin to be grateful and thankful for it. It becomes a ray of light, a small ray of light, that when you now take in the oxygen, you are thankful that you did nothing to put this oxygen out there. You did nothing for this oxygen. It's just flowing towards you. And then you become aware of it. And you become so grateful for the gift of that breath that represents life to you. Do you know what happens when you can live in that state of awareness for a while? That I'm breathing. This is incredible. I'm doing one thing that keeps me alive through this invisible thing I can't see, that is just attracted to my nose and goes into my body and replenishes my organs and renews my blood, nourishes my blood. You become grateful for it. That gratitude will pervade your body. And this is how your body becomes well. You will realize that aches you were feeling in parts of your body will begin to diminish because of an awareness of the gratitude of something as small but as important as oxygen. But a lot of times, we fixate on the big pain and ignore gratitude for the small and important oxygen. But the big pain is very linked to our gratitude for the small thing. That small thing is the light. You see, that night that I was on the bed and I fixated on my parents being alive, it pervaded me so much that I began to become grateful for being a parent to my kids and being present in their lives. And then I started becoming grateful for my kids. You see how I started from my parents and I ended with my kids? That is how awareness works. A lot of us need to be more aware. A lot of us are very woke, and that's what the woke culture is from. Awakening. You're very woke. You have too much knowledge. But has the woke culture ever made anybody happy? Think about it. Does wokeness make people happy? Does it make them kind? Does it make them polite? Does it make them patient? In this woke age, more people have committed suicide than ever before. In this woke age, more marriages have been broken than ever before. In this woke age, there is more child abuse than there has been ever before. It is not enough to seek knowledge. When you seek knowledge outside of God, when you take the fruit and say, I will eat it by myself, rather than waiting for God to come in the evening and talking with God to give you understanding, you will never find peace and happiness. In fact, blindness is the least state of consciousness, but awakeness is the worst. When you are awoken, that's the worst. You don't want to be awoken. You want to be aware. So people will send you books, read these books, read this thing, read this history about how black people were treated, about how black people were this, about how Christianity is a this, how this is a that. It just cause you more frustration in your life. Conspiracy theory. I don't know one conspiracy theorist that is happy. They are always sad, angry people that can't live their life. They become hermits. They stay in their house. I don't know one that is a happy person. They might say very intelligent things, that might be true revelations, but they reveal darkness, never light. God is the only one that can give us true understanding. And it's my prayer that God will open the eyes of our understanding and our minds will be flooded with light. My name is Tola T.A. Alabi, and this is the TA Podcast.